This is David Diaz, former WBC lightweight champion of the world, and you're listening to The Grueling Truth.
Welcome to The Grueling Truth's Inside Boxing Weekly Show. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster. Right now I want to welcome in my co-host, Jeremiah Preisser.
Good evening, all. Happy to be on. Excited for tonight's show.
All right, so we're going to start off by recapping last week's fights, which actually were better than I think we expected, but we'll start off with the ones that weren't better than we expected. We'll go with Shannon Briggs with a KO1 over Zarate. I guess Carlos Zarate has moved up to heavyweight over the last 30 years.
Yeah, Zarate he looked chubby, he looked flabby. He looked out of his depth even against an old Shannon Briggs. I mean, I would have much preferred Briggs' original opponent over this in Dimitrenko, but, all they're really trying to get at is Hay versus Briggs. So I guess it'll do. I don't know. This is the same type of opponent Briggs has been knocking out for a long time, probably for the last 10 years or so, aside from Vitaly Klitschko. Zarate he didn't look competitive. Briggs just went in there, took it to him, got him out of there.
Yeah, then you talked about David Hay. David Hay's first fight in a while, KO2 over Arnold Grigeri, or whatever his name is. What was your impression of that?
Yeah, I don't know how to pronounce his name either, but to me...
It'll probably be the last time we ever have to talk about the guy on the show, so it's not that big a deal.
So, forget it. That was a mismatch, much like Briggs' fights. I mean, Grigeri, or however you say his name, he had a good record, but watching him fight looked like he probably took on a lot of soft hometown opposition. Hay just went in there and dominated, knocked the guy down with a jab before stopping him afterwards. It was just a mismatch, but if Hay versus Briggs is what they're trying to get at, I guess it did the trick.
So what's your opinion of Hay versus Briggs? Do you think Briggs has a chance?
Well, I mean, Briggs he has a shot, I suppose. I wouldn't give him much of one, to be honest with you. I mean, Briggs, he's been, I don't think he's beat anybody in the top 50 in like 10 years. Hay looked like he's slipping to me. I don't know if that's because he wanted to put on bulk, but he just didn't look as sharp. He didn't look as fast. And I suppose that helps Briggs in a way. But if they fight, I expect Hay to beat him. I expect him to stop him. Okay.
I saw parts of it, but all right, that brings us to Joseph Parker, fought in Australia against Carlos Takam. Definitely a step up in competition, as we talked about last week. What's your take on Parker? I think it's time for him to even move up, maybe to a top 10 fighter.
Yeah, and I think Takam is near that. He's given some good fighters some good tests, like Povetkin, Perez. I think Parker looked good. He had a shaky moment there late in the fight, but Parker passed flying colors. I'm not sure that he's a burgeoning superstar, but he looks like a solid top 10 guy at least. Apparently, he is high ranking in the IBF now, and so that may set up a fight with Anthony Joshua in the future. But I'd like to see him get another top 10 guy on his resume before moving up. But he's already taken a stay busy fight. I can't remember the guy's name, but he's staying active. I think he's preparing.
All right, that brings us to the Showtime card that'll be coming up, or that was last week. We'll start off with Jermell Charlo, a KO8 over John Jackson. I think Jackson gave him more trouble than definitely you or I thought he would. What was your take on that one?
Yeah, I think a lot of people figured that would be a mismatch. John Jackson, he's looked good at times. He was outboxing Andy Lee for most of the fight until he got caught, and he did the same thing to Jermell Charlo. He was outboxing him. He was moving well. Charlo didn't seem to cut off the ring. Jackson was able to jab with him. I thought he punched a little harder. But then again, just like the Andy Lee fight, Jackson ran into a punch and got stopped. It's unfortunate. I think Jackson looks like a good fighter, but I think he inherited his father's chin.
Yeah, and that was always John David's problem too. So where do you think Jermell goes from here?
Well, I think he takes a path similar to his brothers. I think he probably gets an easy optional defense, and then maybe what I would like, I don't know where he goes, but what I would like to see is for him to defend against a guy like Demetrius Andrade, Erislandy Lara, even though it's doubtful seeing as they have the same trainer. Almost no chance that he defends against, him and his brother Unify. But they're big guys. I wouldn't be surprised if they move to 160 soon.
All right, and you talked about his brother, the other champion in the family, Jamal Charlo, with a tough unanimous decision win over Austin Trout. I think just from what we talked about last week when we previewed the fight, I think Trout gave him a lot more trouble than you originally thought he would.
Yeah, and it's because Trout hasn't looked that good since he got beat by Lara. I mean, he got beat by Canelo, got clearly beat by Lara, and then he struggled against, I believe it was Daniel Dawson of Australia, where he got knocked down 2 times. But, hey, Trout came prepared. He looked like he was in really good shape. He boxed really nicely. Charlo looked a little confused. I could see that there was some inexperience in play, where he kept trying to find the right hand. Both Charlos are known for their jabs, but Jamal seemed to give it up fairly quickly. He didn't cut off the ring as well as I would have liked to, but it was a close fight, and, Charlo I thought looked good, against a wily veteran.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jamal, I don't know what your opinion is on this, but I think he's the better of the 2 brothers, even though they're both solid fighters.
Yeah, I agree. I think if there's something that Jamal has that Jermell doesn't, I think it's a punch. I don't think Jamal is a huge puncher. I mean, Austin Trout seemed to take his punches pretty well, whereas Canelo was able to knock him down. But Jermell has that equalizer. He is able to stop guys, whereas Jermell, he's a soft puncher, and I think he has a better career than his brother.
All right, and we had the main event, which was a rematch of a draw fought a few years ago. We got Lara-Martirosyan losing a unanimous decision to Lara. But what was your take on that fight? I think it was a lot more competitive fight than what we thought it would be.
Yeah, no, I think Martirosyan showed his best. I think that's the best I've ever seen him fight. His right hand is a strong suit, so I guess that kind of plays well against a southpaw. But Martirosyan came in there. He pressed the fight. He landed a lot of solid punches. And I don't know if Lara is slowing down or if he's just trying to be a bit more fan-friendly. But he used the high guard a lot. He didn't move around as much as say, he did against, Canelo. And I think that helped out. That helped create action. But I thought Lara outboxed him. He's still a really sharp guy. Has excellent timing and distance. But yeah, it was a good fight. I was surprised. I didn't expect it to be. I thought Lara would stick, move, outbox him, win a clear decision. But it was pretty good.
All right, and that'll bring us to this week's fights, which will be somehow Sugar Shane Mosley against David Avanesian. Yeah, you know how I am with names. I'll figure it out. If he wins, I promise I'll say it right if he's ever on the show again. But David Avanesian against Shane Mosley for the interim, the interim welterweight or super middleweight title?
It's the welterweight title.
Yeah, and what exactly does it mean if you're the interim champion?
Well, it means that you're basically you're the backup guy. If
you're the backup champion of the world.
Yeah, basically, yeah. I don't know how that works. I mean, WBA has titles for everything now. But if, say, for instance, the winner of Thurman Porter got injured, retired, moved up in weight, David Avanesian would then be promoted to super titleist.
The heck? Well, see, that's why you should never leave your phone on during a show if you heard Monday Night Football music. But it is a cool-ass song, you have to admit. But,
yeah, everybody likes it.
Yeah. But the David Avanesian, what do you know about him?
Well, I watched a bit of footage before I got on. I seen some footage of the Navarro fight, and Avanesian, he's a solid guy. He's highly technical, like a lot of Russians are. He does have very quick hands. He's pretty accurate. He strings his punches together pretty well. He'll switch from orthodox to southpaw, and he can be effective out of both stances. He's not really a sticker and mover. He's a guy who likes to fight. He's not really a pressure fighter. He's not a stick and mover. He likes to stand in the middle of the ring and try to outthink you. Again, he looks like a good fighter. And going into the fight against Shane Mosley, who is now 44 years of age, I believe, I think Evanesian has a good chance. In fact, I'd probably favor him. I've seen Mosley's recent fights, and he seems to have no problem letting his hands go even at this age. But then again, when I see him against top-flight opposition, he is hesitant. He can't pull the trigger like he used to. And I just don't quite think he's the same guy. And for the purpose of not wanting to see Mosley hurt, I'm going to favor the Russian here, probably by decision.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if this was even 3 years ago, I would take Mosley. To be able to beat this guy, I think he's going to have to be able to, use some lateral movement, and I don't know that he can do that for 10 or 12 rounds anymore.
No, I mean, Mosley's he's still a wily fighter. All those years of experience, they'll help him. I think he'll be able to clip Evanesian from time to time. But from what I've seen, David seems to take a solid punch. So I just think Mosley, and Evanesian, I think they sit in center ring. Mosley tries to use his speed, which is diminished, and Evanesian just scores more points. I don't see it as a decisive victory, but again, I favor the Russian.
All right, and that brings us to probably the major fight of the week. We've got for the WBA super welterweight title, Ricky Burns versus Michel DeRoca. What's your first take on that? Is Burns in any risk of losing his title here?
Yeah, I wish I knew a lot about DeRoca. It's hard following the Italian guys because a lot of them, they like to stay home, rack up wins. I don't know much about DeRoca. And this title it's the one that Adrian Broner had, and apparently now that's vacant, and now somehow these two guys get a chance at it. So not knowing much about the Italian, I figure here that Ricky Burns, because the organizations have been pretty friendly to the British fighters, and the British scene is a lot better than it used to be. I'm going to favor Ricky Burns, the veteran guy. He's a tough guy. I mean, he's still a good fighter. I mean, he gave Omar Figueroa Jr. a really tough fight. He's had a couple wins since then. So I'm going to have to favor him decision, again, largely because I don't know much about the Italian.
All right, so I'm going to pull a surprise on you here because we were going to talk about this a couple weeks ago, but since not a lot going on coming up this week, we have to come up with another topic. I wrote an article about the top 10 British boxers of all time. You want to talk about yours, compare them to mine? Maybe we can argue about something?
The top 10 British fighters?
Top 10 British fighters.
Okay. Well,
so,
let's see.
If you want, I count them down. You just tell me if you agree or disagree.
Okay, well, give me 1 second. Let me make sure that I get this list. Because I couldn't tell you all the fighters that you chose off the top of your head. Or off the top of my head, sorry.
Well, neither could I, but I could read them to you because I got it in front of me now because I just figured we'd do it.
Mm-hmm.
And my only problem was I got a lot of flack for not having Stevie Collins on it. Or was that the Irish one? I don't remember. But
it might have been the Irish one.
Yeah, I think it was the Irish one.
All right. So I see. Okay. All right. So you've got Ted Kid Lewis at number 1. And I would disagree with that. If I were to formulate a list, again, I don't want to say anything is concrete because I think it takes a lot of research to create one of these. But if I were to make a list, I'd probably have Bob Fitzsimmons at number 1.
Well, you can't bitch with me too much then because I had Fitzsimmons at number 2. So
that's true. That is true. Well, I think Ted Kid Lewis should be probably maybe 3rd. And so the reason I'd have Bob Fitzsimmons number 1 is he was first 3-division champion in boxing history. He beat legends to get there. He beat the nonpareil Jack Dempsey for the middleweight title. He beat Jim Corbett for the heavyweight title, and he was beating Jeffries as well before being stopped. And then he beat Philadelphia Jack O'Brien for the light